With the upcoming release of Metroid Dread, I have seen a lot of people want to get into the Metroid series, so I wanted to offer a bit of a brief but comprehensive guide on why, how, and where to get into the series. I'm going to split this into two different sections. The first section is a brief why you should get into Metroid, and the second section will cover how and which games to play. Timestamps will be shown on screen, but also in the description if you want to just skip to the section that you need to see. First off, why should you even get into Metroid? What does it offer that makes it worth playing? Well, simply put, a lot. Metroid is a Metroidvania, also known as Search Action. A major part of gameplay is focused around exploring and finding new abilities and items to gain access to new areas. While this might sound kind of basic, trust me, it can be incredibly satisfying. It's really exciting to find an area you can't get through, and later on, once you get an ability, being able to use it and get into a new area. It's a bit of an aha moment, and I love it. The gameplay loop, once you really get into it, feels insanely tight. Besides the gameplay loop, you also have the lore of the series. Metroid has some super deep lore. You don't need to be into the lore to enjoy it, but if you are a fan of Metroid's lore, it's great. Another huge draw of the series for me has always been the atmosphere. Metroid creates a level of atmosphere that is unparalleled by most Nintendo series. The world completely sucks you in, and the feeling of isolation you can get at times is unique. It can be unsettling at times too. I wouldn't really describe it as complete full horror, but it certainly has a nice atmosphere and level of tension to it. To end off this brief segment on why you should play Metroid, the music. Metroid has some excellent music which you can hear in the background right now. Metroid music can range from atmospheric to being straight up bangers. I love the soundtrack of a lot of Metroid games. It's not you're hopefully interested in the Metroid series. Where do you begin? Well, at the time of writing, Metroid Dread isn't out yet. However, we do know that it will have a prologue. If you don't want to play the rest of the series and just want to dive into Dread, you should be perfectly fine to do so. If you're interested in Metroid and do want to play the other games, well, here we go. I have put together a guide on where to start and where to play each game I'd recommend. I'm splitting this into two different groups, so let's start with the first group. You only have a Switch. As of now, the only Metroid content on Switch is Metroid 1, Super Metroid, and soon, Metroid Dread. I would definitely not recommend starting with Metroid 1. It hasn't aged well at all. Instead, you should start with Super or Dread. Super is accessible as an entry point into the series. It's tightly designed and will give you a lot of ideas on what Metroid can be like. You may get a little lost at times, but trust me, you won't get too lost, and the game itself is a lot of fun anyway. If Metroid Dread releases and reviews well, I'd probably recommend that. Once Metroid Dread releases, check the comment section below. I should have left a pinned comment by that point on if I'd recommend Dread as a starting point. Moving on to the next group, what if you have a Wii U or any other device that can play GBA games? Well, first, congrats, you're one of the few people who bought a Wii U. And second, if you own a Wii U, you now have a lot more access to the Metroid series. If you own a Wii U, start with Metroid Zero Mission. Metroid Zero Mission is my favorite Metroid in a remake and retelling of the first Metroid. It modernizes everything about the game to take what was originally a lackluster experience by modern standards and turn it into something amazing. Also, if you have a Wii U, a lot of the Metroid series is indeed on there. Prime Trilogy's on the eShop, Fusion's on the eShop. There's a lot of Metroid content there. If you own a Wii U, you can probably play most of the Metroid series on there. Those are the two main groups I wanted to break it into. There's plenty of other groups I could go into, like if you only have a 3DS, maybe just start with Samus Returns, but I wanted to stick with the most modern console in the best case scenario for a home console. Now, what happens after your first Metroid? Well, I've made a bit of a flowchart of sorts. Now, what happens after your first Metroid? Well, I've made a bit of a flowchart of sorts. From this point on, I'm going to be referencing multiple consoles, so maybe more than one console, though the Wii U has most of these games. I have created two different charts. The first one for if you start at Super, and the second one for if you start at Zero Mission. If you start at Samus Returns or Dread, just follow the Super chart and eventually play Super. As you can see from this chart, after doing Super you should move on to Dread or Samus Returns. I put both here because Dread isn't out, but when Dread is out, if it's considered better than Samus Returns, just move on to Dread. Then you just do Zero Mission and Fusion. After Fusion, you do the Prime games. After the Prime games, well look, you're done. If you start with Zero Mission and after that go to Samus Returns, Super, and Fusion, then Dread, then do the Prime games, as you can tell, all of my recommendations follow doing 2D first and then Prime. Why is that? Well, Prime is by no means bad. In fact, I love Metroid Prime. I find the 2D games to be better starting points though. Plus, I think starting with 2D will help you get more prepared for Dread. It also comes down to length. Zero Mission is short enough where starting with Zero Mission is likely less of a daunting task compared to Prime. You can probably finish Zero Mission in a day or a weekend. If you feel like starting with Prime though, go for it. Prime's fantastic and it's still excellent and worth playing. I think it's so great if you start with Prime. The main reason I didn't recommend doing chronological order of the entire series is because I feel like it'd be a little disjointed and wouldn't flow as well doing it that way. I think it's better to just see all the 2Ds, see their evolution, then maybe go back, do Prime. Plus, I don't think you really need Prime if you're going to play the 2D games first. You can enjoy them either way. I don't think you lose anything if you save Prime for later, plus then you can save Prime for closer to Prime 4 when that releases. However, if that's your preferred method of playing Metroid, go for it, don't let me stop you. What about the games I left out? Prime Pinball, Prime Hunters, Prime Federation Force, and Other M. Well, Hunters, Federation Force, and Other M I do think you should still play once you get into the franchise, but those are usually only games I recommend to people who are fully into Metroid. Prime Pinball you don't really need to play at all, but if you want to play it, go for it. None of them are bad games, just not ones I recommend early on due to them being lower tier Metroid games. Also, one small other note, if the openness of something like Super Metroid scares you off or you aren't a fan of it, Zero Mission or Fusion might be more your style due to them feeling more linear and guiding you better. Don't be afraid to use a guide either, by the way. There's not a wrong way to play. Same thing for the order of the games. While these are my recommended orders, there's not really a wrong order. If you're having fun and enjoying Metroid, that's what matters the most, not the way you play them or not when you play them. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this guide for getting into Metroid and found it useful. I didn't want to spend too long on each topic, so if you have any questions, feel free to comment and I can answer them. Metroid is absolutely one of my favorite franchises in all of gaming, and I hope to see more people get into it. It is part of why I love Metroidvanias, and it really did form a lot of my gaming taste. But that's all for now. I'm Fuse, signing out. See ya.